welcome everybody to the Culture Works live stream series. I'm your host and interviewer and best friend, I think, of Adrian Gostick, my wonderful co-author. He's the good-looking one with the hair. And thank you for all of you that tune in every time we have one of these. It's always a delight to be a part of the community. And Adrian, you write so wonderfully for Forbes. And the article that we want to talk about that you have written most recently is this idea of the 4-day work week, which is gaining a lot of momentum. There's a lot of research behind it. And you start the article off with a wonderful story, which, by the way, I've known you for over 20 years. I did not know that when Tony was born, that you asked your boss to go to a 4-day work week.
27 years ago. Yeah, I was working for an oil and gas company, and I went to my boss and, hey, I'm first time dad, the experience, you're kind of stressed out and you're, needing to help out at home. And she goes, oh, yeah, let's give it a try, but let's keep it on the down low. There's absolutely no HR policy to allow for this. So I worked, 10-hour days, 4 days a week. And boy, that day just was so important to be able to help and also just to regain your sanity after, with all the stresses of personal and home life. And then one day, the department receptionist gets a call from one of the division presidents and looking for me. And she goes, it's his day off. And, there was the end of 4-day work week. And it was such a shame, but it helped me get through that time. But now here we are 27 years later, and people are saying, hey, is this the next big thing?
Well, it's so interesting because there are professions where they do that and have for a long time. My daughter-in-law is a nurse. It's not unusual for them to work 4 10-hour days and have 3 days off, right? 4 days on, three days off. So there are some industries where it has stuck. Isn't it interesting that where you were working, it was working really well? And yet, because you were outside the norm and you were the exception, the whole idea that, well, that's not fair to everybody else.
Yeah. And it's usually fairness. You're exactly right there. And so what, the studies that we talk about in the Forbes article, there was this UK study that they looked at 61 different organizations across various industries, from high tech to service, because one of the big problems is, hey, we need coverage for our clients, right? So that's a lot of what we found. And what they found is that not only does this increase team members' happiness, reduce stress and burnout, which you might expect, but it actually did not hurt productivity or customer satisfaction levels. And employees were, less stressed, less overwhelmed, and they were better able to manage their workloads. And we all know the benefit or the impact of stress in the workplace, right, Chess?
Yeah, and it seems to me that if your goal is higher engagement, higher retention, higher productivity, it would be something that you would take a really hard look at. And yet with it not being the norm, it's an uphill battle. So I appreciate when you said, look, the study wasn't just a few companies. It was 61 companies. It was 2,500 people. So a pretty good assortment. What other interesting facts came out about that study that really
one of the things that we found in the study was, and by the way, done by Cambridge, University of Cambridge, Boston College. So it's not exactly fly-by-night organizations. Right. And they found that a variety of metrics, revenue, attrition, reports of productivity, employee well-being, they had really good results. So they didn't see a drop in revenue or productivity, et cetera. And of course, as you would imagine, for the employees, they produced really positive outcomes. People were better able, they said, to concentrate on their tasks when they were at work. And the time off allowed them to recharge, and it led to more creativity when they were at work. And we're all looking for innovation, right?
Yeah. I'd like to welcome our listeners and our viewers. We've got some wonderful people tuning in. Benjia, I'm sorry if that's not how you pronounce your name. Nelson from Uganda. We got Deb from Tucson, Samuel from Dallas.
You got the Ukraine here represented. We're wishing you the best.
Elaine, I hope you're safe wherever you are in Ukraine. And Joseph Olaput from Priceless Farms in Uganda. Priceless Farms, Adrian, just as we digress, is run by my nephew.
Oh, wow.
And so we're delighted to have you here, Joseph. So Adrian, with all this positivity around, lowering the work week, I was just talking to a good friend of mine who talks about belonging. That's her. And she does a lot of stuff with Penn University down there in Philadelphia. And she said this idea of belonging has become a big thing, that the company has now replaced a lot of the other things that we used to do, or at least generations before, when you were in a bowling league, or more people went to church and they belonged to, the Elks Club or the Masons or whatever. So this idea of belonging has now been moved to the workplace. And isn't it interesting that taking one day out seems to have increased belonging, satisfaction and relationships? Fascinating when you think of it in that context of belonging, isn't it?
It is. And we've got this interesting push and pull right now where, most sort of senior leaders listening to this kind of go, yeah, right, guys, wishful thinking. And you got 82% of employees who said they'd be interested in this 4-day work week. Now, by the way, neither of us are saying this is the answer for every organization. Well, all we're saying is that creative companies right now are thinking of ways to get people to commit and to be a little bit more engaged. The reason that I had other offers that came during that time when I was doing that 4-day work week. It was at a point in my career where I was starting to get some headhunters calling, et cetera. And I wasn't about to talk to any of them because my company was working with me. Well, it actually wasn't my company. It was my manager who was working with me, who was being a little bit more creative. And that created a sense of belonging with me. And I stayed a lot longer than I maybe could have or would have. I may have moved on to another place because I really felt a very strong attachment to the organization making some ways for me to belong and to really fit. And so I think one of those things we're seeing is that organizations that are a little bit more creative and flexible are creating those feelings of belonging.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. We've done so much work over the years, you and I. And for those of you listening in, Adrian and I have been working together for over 20 years now, 22 years, actually. That's a long time. 23. This is our 23rd year.
24th, yeah. 1999. Yeah.
It's a long time. At any rate, we'd often talk about incentives. What are some of the incentives? What are some of the things, and it used to be increased benefits, flex time. Well, you think about a day a week. What a huge incentive that would be. And how eager people are to say, absolutely, I will work a 10-hour day, Monday through Thursday, to have a long weekend every weekend. Yeah. And then you think about, like the national holidays and the other holidays that come in. Now it's not a 3-day holiday for you, it's a 4-day holiday. And those kinds of incentives, I think, and by the way, not giving up any time at work. Right? You're still getting a 40-hour work week.
Right. And what's interesting in this study, they actually cut their hours. And so the people in this study actually worked for 8-hour days. So they didn't, but they were paid for a full week. And so that's what was interesting about this study specifically, that they still didn't find any drop in productivity. They didn't find any drop in revenue, et cetera. And they continue to pay people their full wage and gave them 4 8-hour days, which is even more interesting, kind of a new wrinkle on this study as well. Now, again, coming back to, look, we're not pushing a 4-day work week. What we are saying is organizations and managers have to be more creative nowadays than they were before. As you mentioned, the guys at flex time. No, people have to come in at 8 and leave at 5. Well, I know a lot of programmers who do their best work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Right. That's when they work. And they're incredibly productive, incredibly innovative, that we have to start thinking in new ways if we really want to get our people engaged. And one of the other things I noticed on this one, Chess, too, which is really interesting, the UN, I think it was yesterday, puts out this doom and gloom of climate. We may be at the tipping point. Well, this actually helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions, less driving, less, so we're actually doing something for the planet, which would be, remarkable as well.
Isn't it interesting, the ripple effect, right? When you start to really get into, why? I think one of the things that really happened during the pandemic was this reassessment. They called it the Great Resignation. I always kind of thought of it as kind of the Great Reassessment. What are we really doing here? And why are we doing it? Because, we all get stuck in ruts, right? This is my job. This is what I do. I probably can't do anything else. And even though I don't really like it, it pays the bills. And even though I'm miserable at work, I hopefully have a pretty good home life. Now with this reassessment, it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. If I can get it all done in 4 days, why not? It's interesting with my daughter-in-law, who's a nurse. she gets paid hourly.
Yeah.
So the hours mattered. So it was 40 hours over 4 days. When you reverse that and you say, I just want to talk about productivity, if I'm not being paid by the hour,
Yeah.
right, then you've got a whole different dynamic. And if you can actually see by working less hours, you get more productivity. Why wouldn't you continue to do that?
And I love what you're bringing up here, because this brings up an interesting idea as well. You're talking about daughter-in-law. A lot of, we think of gender equality when we think of this as well, that a lot of, women are allowed to come back into the workforce because they're given a little bit more flexibility with this kind of scheduling. Whereas, the old 5-day work week, that becomes problematic for more women and for men who are trying to be parents as well, et cetera. So this actually increases gender equality when we're a little bit more flexible in our workplaces, which a lot of hospitals we work with have figured that out, that these schedules are better for many of their working parents that they're working with.
It's often what we talk about, right, Adrian? Like you've got all these rules and whatnot, and that's for the masses.
Yeah.
When you're a leader, you really lead individuals.
Yeah.
So how do you figure out? And you and I talked about this for years on well, that's not fair. If I do it for Adrian, then I have to do it for Chester. Well, Chester might not be interested in what's good for Adrian, So this idea of having that equality, and as leaders, I think it's so important to get the team's buy-in and say, by the way, we're going to do this for Adrian, understand the situation, and have everybody not only accept it, embrace it, and be excited for Adrian.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, this is going to be great. And oh, by the way, we're still planning on having kids in our family too. What a great benefit that will be. And again, another way to retain and engage your top people.
Yeah. That idea of fairness is really interesting, because that poor receptionist working there never had any hope of that, and so maybe that was festering her in a little bit, that it's his day off, so there was a little bit of a poke of jealousy there. That
nice.
And again, if we had talked of as an organization, look, this is something you can do for a year when you're a new parent, that would have been a lot different environment than we had to keep it on the down low.
Yeah. One last story, and I know we're coming up to our time here, is that I remember working in New York City. We were selling media time, and we had summer hours, which was every other Friday you got off. So, it was July and August. Business was much slower then. People were taking vacations and so on. And so you got every other Friday off. Yeah. And you know what? It was like the best time of year.
Yeah.
and we no one wanted it to go away. So everybody, when they had that 4-day worked like crazy, made sure everything was taken care of. And it was kind of interesting. But then September would roll around and it was life back to normal. And isn't it interesting if we thought, hey, this is working so well, why not do it for 52 weeks a year? Well, why not? Why not? It would have been a great benefit. Yeah. Well, Adrian, we've got 1 minute left. If there's one or two things you'd want people to remember from the article on the 4-day work week, what might they be?
Well, for many years, you and I, we would sort of look down our noses at the European style of work, because they have these 6-week vacations in the summer. How come you're not working hard like us? And we're realizing over the years that many other countries sort of have, like I focused on Denmark in the article, and has one of the shortest work weeks in Europe, and has the highest level of life satisfaction and work-life harmony. That maybe sometimes we could learn a few things from some others. And so, let's not think we have it all figured out. Let's try some new things. Many of the clients we're working with are like construction companies and project management companies, and they're trying some of these things out because they realize they want to keep their people and they want to keep them engaged.
Great. Well, this is the CultureWorks live stream series. We're delighted to have you join us. Follow us at thecultureworks.com. We've written wonderful books that we'd love you to buy, Leading with Gratitude and Anxiety at Work. And until next time, thanks so much for tuning in. Share it with your friends and family. And hey, a 4-day work week. Who knew? Cheers.